The human warship Eagle's Wrath floated silently through the endless blackness of space. Its shiny surface reflected the faint glow of a faraway star, making it look like a speck of light in an ocean of darkness. Inside the ship, Captain Laura Hayes stood on the bridge, her sharp blue eyes scanning the screens and monitors in front of her. She was a strong leader, known for her calmness under pressure and her ability to make quick decisions. Around her, the crew moved with quiet efficiency, each person focused on their task. The hum of machinery and soft beeps of instruments filled the air, creating a sense of order in the vast emptiness outside. Lieutenant Daniel Carter sat at his station, his fingers gliding over the controls as he monitored the ship's navigation systems. He was one of the best navigators in the fleet, and his steady hands had guided the Eagle's Wrath through some of the most dangerous parts of space. Beside him, Ensign Rachel Monroe kept watch over the communication panel, her young face showing both excitement and nervousness. This was her first major mission, and she was determined to prove herself. For weeks, the Eagle's Wrath had been patrolling the outer edges of the Sol system, responding to reports of increased pirate activity. These weren't ordinary pirates. They were an alien race called the Krill. The Krill were infamous for their cruelty and their advanced technology, especially their cloaking devices, which allowed them to appear and disappear without warning. Humanity had faced many challenges since venturing into space, but the Krill were different. They didn't just attack ships. They hunted them, striking without mercy and leaving nothing behind. As the Eagle's Wrath approached a distant asteroid belt, rumors began to swirl among the crew. Some said the Krill used the belt as a hiding spot, launching surprise attacks from its dense clusters of rocks. Others whispered that the Krill had set up a secret base somewhere within the belt, using it as a staging ground for their raids. No one knew for sure, but everyone agreed on one thing. If the Krill were there, the Eagle's Wrath would find them. Laura leaned forward slightly, studying the data displayed on the main screen. "Anything unusual?" she asked, her voice calm but firm. "Nothing yet, Captain," Daniel replied, his tone professional. "But we're entering a high-risk zone. If they're here, they'll likely wait until we're deep inside before making a move." Laura nodded. "Keep your eyes open. I want every sensor running at full capacity." "Yes, Mom," Rachel chimed in, adjusting the settings on her console. "I've boosted the range on the scanners. If there's even a whisper of movement out there, we'll hear it." The tension on the bridge was palpable. Everyone knew the stakes. The Krill were not just a threat to ships. They were a threat to humanity itself. Their raids had grown bolder in recent months, targeting supply lines and colonies along the frontier. Entire settlements had vanished overnight, leaving behind only silence. The United Earth Fleet had sent the Eagle's Wrath to investigate, but no one expected the mission to be easy. As the ship entered the asteroid belt, the view outside changed dramatically. Massive rocks loomed in every direction, some as big as mountains, others no larger than a car. The Eagle's Wrath weaved carefully between them, its engines humming softly as it adjusted course to avoid collisions. Dust and debris floated in the void, catching the faint light of distant stars. It was a breathtaking sight, but no one had time to admire it. Every shadow could hide danger, and every moment of calm might be the prelude to chaos. "Captain," Rachel said suddenly, breaking the quiet, "I'm picking up something strange. There's a faint energy signature coming from ahead." Laura turned to face her. "Can you pinpoint it?" Rachel hesitated, her fingers flying over the controls. "It's hard to say. It's faint, but it's definitely there. Could be interference from the asteroids, or it could be them." Laura finished for her. She straightened up, her expression unreadable. "Daniel, adjust our heading. Take us closer, but stay alert. We don't want to walk into a trap." "Aye, Captain," Daniel replied, already working on the calculations. "Adjusting course now." The ship drifted forward, slipping deeper into the asteroid field. The crew held their breath, waiting for something, anything, to happen. Minutes passed, each one feeling longer than the last. Then, without warning, the lights on the bridge flickered, and a loud crackle filled the air. What was that? Someone shouted. Before anyone could answer, the sensors went haywire. Alarms blared, red lights flashing across the bridge. On the main screen, 3 shapes materialized out of nowhere. Alien ships, their jagged designs pulsing with an eerie green glow. They looked like living creatures, their surfaces shifting and shimmering as if alive. "They're here," Laura said quietly, her voice steady despite the sudden chaos. "Everyone, to your stations. This is it." The crew sprang into action, their training kicking in. Weapon systems came online, shields powered up, and the ship braced for battle. Outside, the krill ships circled like predators, their movements fluid and unpredictable. One of them fired a burst of energy, forcing the Eagle's Wrath to dodge at the last second. "Captain, they're hailing us," Rachel announced, her voice rising above the noise. "Put it on screen," Laura ordered. A grotesque figure appeared. A krill commander, its insectoid features twisted into what might have been a sneer. Its glowing eyes locked onto the camera, and its mandibles clicked as it spoke in broken English. "Surrender your vessel, humans, or face destruction." Laura stared back at the screen, her jaw tightening. "Tell them we're not afraid," she said, her voice cold and clear. "And tell them they've made a big mistake." Rachel relayed the message, and the krill responded with another volley of weapons fire. The Eagle's Wrath shuddered under the impact, but the crew held their ground. This was only the beginning. The krill ships moved with terrifying speed, their sleek forms darting between the asteroids like predators stalking prey. The Eagle's Wrath rocked violently as another blast of energy struck its shields, sending sparks flying across the bridge. Alarms blared loudly, and the crew scrambled to stabilize the ship. Captain Laura Hayes gripped the railing in front of her knuckles white, but her expression calm. She had faced danger before, and she wasn't about to let fear take over now. "Shields at 70%, shouted Ensign Rachel Monroe, her voice rising over the chaos. Her fingers flew across her console as she tried to reroute power to the damaged systems. "We can't take many more hits like that." Lieutenant Daniel Carter didn't look up from his station. His eyes were fixed on the navigation screen as he plotted a course through the asteroid field. "If we stay still, they'll tear us apart," he said, his tone urgent but controlled. "We need to use the terrain to our advantage." Laura nodded. "Do it. Take us deeper into the belt." The engines roared to life, and the Eagle's Wrath surged forward, weaving between the massive rocks. The krill followed closely, their weapons firing relentlessly. Bright flashes of light illuminated the darkness as plasma bolts exploded against the ship's shields. Inside, the crew worked furiously to keep the Eagle's Wrath operational. Chief Engineer Kevin Doyle was down in the engine room, shouting orders to his team as they struggled to maintain power to the shields and thrusters. "Come on, hold together," Doyle muttered under his breath, wiping sweat from his forehead. He tapped furiously at the controls, rerouting energy from non-essential systems to keep the ship running. "We're not done yet." On the bridge, Laura kept her focus on the battle unfolding outside. The krill ships were faster and more agile than the Eagle's Wrath, but the human warship had something the aliens couldn't match: experience and determination. Laura glanced at Daniel, who was already several steps ahead of her. "Captain," Daniel said, pointing to a cluster of large asteroids ahead. "If we time this right, we can use the gravitational pull of that rock to slingshot us into position. It'll throw them off balance." Laura studied the screen for a moment, then gave a sharp nod. "Make it happen." Daniel relayed the instructions to the helm, and the ship adjusted its course. The Eagle's Wrath accelerated toward the massive asteroid, its engines glowing brightly as it pushed harder. The krill ships pursued, their movements swift and confident. They thought they had the humans cornered. But they were wrong. As the Eagle's Wrath approached the asteroid, Daniel activated the maneuver. The ship swung around the massive rock, using its gravity to pick up speed and change direction. The krill ships followed, but they weren't prepared for what came next. Hidden turrets embedded in the asteroid's surface suddenly came to life, firing a barrage of missiles directly at the alien vessels. "What the?" one of the crew members exclaimed, staring at the screens in disbelief. "Chief Doyle's idea," Daniel explained with a small grin. "He'd rigged those turrets weeks ago, just in case." The ambush caught the krill completely off guard. One of their ships erupted in a fiery explosion, its jagged frame breaking apart as debris scattered into space. The other two ships veered away, their pilots clearly shaken by the unexpected attack. For a brief moment, the Eagle's wrath had the upper hand. "Nice work, everyone," Laura said, allowing herself a small smile. But the relief was short-lived. The remaining krill ships regrouped quickly, their glowing hulls shimmering with renewed aggression. "Don't get too comfortable. They're not done yet." Sure enough, the aliens launched a counterattack. Their weapons fired with even greater intensity, forcing the Eagle's wrath to dodge once again. The crew braced themselves as another volley of plasma bolts struck the ship, shaking it violently. "Shields at 50%. Rachel called out, her voice tinged with panic. "We're losing power fast." Laura clenched her jaw. "Kevin, I need those shields back online. Now." Down in the engine room, Doyle was already working on it. He barked orders to his team, his mind racing as he tried to find a solution. "Divert auxiliary power to the shields," he instructed, "and someone patch up that coolant leak before the whole system overheats." Back on the bridge, Daniel continued to guide the ship through the asteroid field, his hand steady on the controls. "Captain, if we can lure them into that narrow gap ahead, we might be able to trap them between the rocks." Laura considered the suggestion for a split second. "Do it. Rachel, prepare a distress signal in case things go south." "Aye, Captain," Rachel replied, though her voice wavered slightly. She didn't want to think about the possibility of failure, but she knew it was a reality they had to face. The Eagle's wrath sped toward the narrow gap, its engines straining under the pressure. The krill ships followed, their weapons blazing. As the human warship slipped through the opening, Daniel triggered a series of pre-programmed commands. Explosive charges planted earlier detonated, causing the surrounding asteroids to shift and collapse. Rocks tumbled into the gap, creating a deadly barrier that trapped the krill ships on the other side. "That should buy us some time," Daniel said, exhaling sharply. "Good thinking," Laura replied, though her expression remained serious. "But don't celebrate yet. We've only slowed them down." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. They had managed to gain the upper hand for now, but everyone knew the fight was far from over. The krill were relentless, and they wouldn't give up easily. Laura turned to face her team, her voice firm and unwavering. "We've shown them what we're capable of," she said. "But this is just the beginning. Stay sharp, stay focused, and remember why we're here. We're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for everyone back home." Her words resonated with the crew, reigniting their determination. They had faced impossible odds before, and they had always found a way to prevail. This time would be no different. Outside, the krill ships struggled to free themselves from the collapsing rocks, their glowing forms flickering with frustration. But deep down, the crew of the Eagle's wrath knew the aliens wouldn't stay trapped for long. The battle was far from over, and the stakes were higher than ever. For now, though, they had earned a brief reprieve, a chance to catch their breath and prepare for what was coming next. And when the krill returned, the humans would be ready. The temporary victory gave the crew of the Eagle's wrath a moment to regroup, but no one allowed themselves to relax. The krill were still out there, and everyone knew it was only a matter of time before they broke free from the trap. Captain Laura Hayes stood at the center of the bridge, her sharp eyes scanning the monitors as she listened to updates from her team. Her mind raced with possibilities, trying to anticipate the enemy's next move. Shields are holding steady at 45%. Ensign Rachel Monroe reported, her voice steadier now after the chaos of the ambush. But we've lost some maneuverability on the port side. Laura nodded. Keep working on those repairs. We'll need every advantage we can get. In the engine room, Chief Engineer Kevin Doyle wiped sweat from his brow as he supervised the repair efforts. Sparks flew around him as his team worked tirelessly to patch up the damaged systems. One of the junior engineers, a young man named Peter Lane, looked up from his station. "Chief, the coolant system is still leaking. If we don't fix it soon, the engines could overheat." Doyle frowned, gripping the edge of a console. "Then we don't have a choice. Shut down the secondary thrusters and reroute all available power to the main engines. We'll deal with the coolant later." Peter hesitated for a moment but quickly obeyed. Everyone trusted Doyle's judgment, even when it meant making tough calls. The ship groaned slightly as the adjustments took effect, but the engines roared back to life with renewed strength. For now, they were safe, but the clock was ticking. Back on the bridge, Lieutenant Daniel Carter studied the navigation screen closely. The asteroid field stretched endlessly in every direction, its jagged rocks casting long shadows in the dim light of distant stars. He tapped a few commands, highlighting a cluster of larger asteroids ahead. "Captain," he said, turning to Laura, "if we can lure them into that cluster, we might be able to set another trap. It's narrow enough to limit their movement." Laura considered the idea for a moment. "It's risky. If they see through it, we'll be boxed in ourselves." "It's our best shot," Daniel replied firmly. "We can't keep running forever." Laura glanced at the rest of the crew, her gaze lingering on each face. They were tired, exhausted, even, but they hadn't given up. She could see the determination in their eyes, the unspoken promise to fight until the very end. Finally, she gave a small nod. "All right, set it up, but make sure we have an exit plan." Daniel cracked a faint smile. "Always do." As the Eagle's wrath moved deeper into the asteroid field, the tension on the bridge grew thicker. The krill ships had finally broken free from the collapsed rocks and were now closing in fast. Their glowing hulls shimmered menacingly as they darted between the asteroids, their weapons charging for another attack. The aliens weren't just relentless. They were smart. Each move they made seemed calculated, designed to corner the human ship and leave it defenseless. "They're getting closer," Rachel warned, her voice tight with worry. "Less than 2 kilometers and closing." "Steady," Laura ordered, her tone calm but firm. "Wait for my signal." The crew held their breath, watching as the krill ships drew nearer. Just as the aliens prepared to fire, Laura gave the order. "Now." The Eagle's wrath surged forward, its engines blazing brightly as it dove into the cluster of asteroids. The krill followed without hesitation, their confidence evident in their aggressive maneuvers. But this time, the humans were ready for them. Hidden explosives planted earlier detonated in a carefully timed sequence, causing the asteroids to shift violently. Massive rocks tumbled toward the krill ships, forcing them to scatter in confusion. One of the alien vessels clipped a falling rock, sending it spinning out of control. Flames erupted from its hull as it collided with another asteroid, exploding in a brilliant flash of light. "Yes," someone shouted on the bridge, unable to contain their excitement. But Laura didn't celebrate. Her eyes remained fixed on the remaining krill ship, which had managed to avoid the worst of the debris. Its glowing form shimmered with anger as it turned to face the Eagle's wrath. "They're not done yet," she said sharply. "Stay focused." The surviving krill ship unleashed a barrage of weapons fire, forcing the Eagle's wrath to dodge once again. The crew braced themselves as another volley struck the shields, shaking the ship violently. "Shields at 30%. Rachel called out, her voice rising in alarm. "We can't take much more of this." Laura clenched her fists, her mind racing. They had slowed the krill down, but the aliens were still dangerous. If they didn't find a way to finish this soon, the Eagle's wrath would be overwhelmed. She turned to Daniel. "Any ideas?" Daniel hesitated for a moment, then pointed to a nearby monitor. There's a weak point in their hull design, right near the engine core. If we can hit it with a concentrated blast, we might disable them. Laura raised an eyebrow. That's a big if. How do we get close enough? I'll take care of that, Daniel replied confidently. Just give me a minute. He quickly plotted a new course, guiding the Eagle's Wrath into a daring spiral around the largest asteroid in the cluster. The Krill ship followed, its weapons firing wildly as it tried to keep up. But the human warship was faster, its movements precise and calculated. As they emerged from behind the asteroid, Daniel lined up the shot perfectly. Fire everything we've got, Laura ordered, her voice cutting through the noise. The Eagle's Wrath unleashed a devastating barrage of missiles and plasma bolts, targeting the weak point on the Krill ship. The alien vessel shuddered under the impact, its glowing hull flickering erratically. For a moment, it seemed like the attack had failed. But then, with a deafening explosion, the Krill ship broke apart, its jagged frame disintegrating into pieces. The bridge erupted in cheers, the crew celebrating their hard-fought victory. But Laura remained silent, her expression unreadable. She knew better than to let her guard down. Even though the immediate threat was gone, the Krill were still out there, lurking somewhere in the vastness of space. Good work, everyone, she said finally, her voice calm but firm. But we're not out of the woods yet. Let's assess the damage and prepare for whatever comes next. The crew nodded, their excitement giving way to renewed focus. They had won this battle, but the war was far from over. And as the Eagle's Wrath drifted silently through the asteroid field, its battered hull glinting faintly in the starlight, Laura couldn't shake the feeling that the Krill would return. And when they did, they wouldn't be alone. The victory over the Krill ships brought a brief moment of relief, but it was short-lived. The crew of the Eagle's Wrath knew they couldn't afford to let their guard down. While the immediate threat had been neutralized, the damage to their ship was significant, and the possibility of more Krill reinforcements loomed large. Captain Laura Hayes called her senior officers to the briefing room, where the air was heavy with both exhaustion and determination. The small room was dimly lit, the faint hum of the ship's systems providing a constant backdrop. Laura stood at the head of the table, her arms crossed as she studied the faces of her team. Lieutenant Daniel Carter sat to her right, his brow furrowed in thought. Ensign Rachel Monroe looked pale but resolute, while Chief Engineer Kevin Doyle rubbed his temples, clearly drained from hours of non-stop repairs. Across the table, Lieutenant Emily Ross, the ship's intelligence officer, tapped nervously on her datapad, reviewing the latest scans of the area. "We've dealt a blow to the Krill," Laura began, her voice steady but firm. "But we all know this isn't over. They're not going to stop coming after us. We need a plan to end this once and for all." Daniel leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "If we can find their base of operations, we might be able to cripple their entire fleet. Without a central command, they'll be disorganized and easier to handle." Emily nodded, glancing at her datapad. "I've been analyzing the flight patterns of the Krill ships we encountered. Based on their movements, there's a high probability their base is somewhere in this sector, likely hidden within one of the larger moons orbiting the nearby gas giant." Laura raised an eyebrow. "How confident are you about that?" 70%, Emily replied without hesitation. "It's the most logical location. The moon has enough resources to sustain a base, and its terrain would provide excellent cover." Kevin sighed, shaking his head. "Even if you're right, getting there won't be easy. Our engines are barely holding together, and the shields are still compromised. If we run into more Krill ships, we won't last long." "I agree," Rachel added quietly. "And we don't have much time. Those reinforcements could show up any minute." Laura listened carefully, weighing the risks. She knew splitting the crew was dangerous, but staying put wasn't an option either. Finally, she made her decision. "We'll divide into 2 teams. I'll lead a strike force aboard a shuttle to infiltrate their base and destroy it from the inside. The rest of you will stay here and hold the Eagle's wrath until we return." The room fell silent. Everyone exchanged uneasy glances, knowing how risky the plan was. Daniel spoke up first. "Captain," with respect, "that's too dangerous. If something goes wrong, we could lose you and the mission." "I'm aware of the risks," Laura said firmly, meeting his gaze. "But we don't have another choice. If we take out their base, we'll buy ourselves enough time to get back to Earth Fleet and warn them about the krill. That's our only shot at stopping them for good." Kevin cleared his throat, looking reluctant but determined. "If you're going through with this, we'll make sure the shuttle is ready. I'll strip parts from the Eagle's wrath if I have to. But promise me one thing, you come back alive." Laura gave him a small, grateful smile. "I'll do my best." Preparations for the mission began immediately. The crew worked tirelessly, gathering weapons, supplies, and equipment for the strike team. Laura chose a group of trusted individuals to accompany her: Corporal Jack Miller, the squad's demolitions expert; Lieutenant Emily Ross, who would handle navigation and communications; and 2 other crew members, Private Sarah Lane and Technician Mark Riley. Each person understood the stakes and was ready to give everything for the mission. As the team boarded the shuttle, Daniel approached Laura one last time. His expression was serious, almost grim. "You don't have to do this alone," he said quietly. "Let me go with you." Laura shook her head, placing a hand on his shoulder. "I need you here. You're the only one who can keep the Eagle's wrath safe. Trust me, I'll be fine." Daniel hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "Just be careful." "I will," Laura promised. With that, she climbed aboard the shuttle, sealing the hatch behind her. The engines roared to life, and the small craft detached from the Eagle's wrath, disappearing into the darkness of space. The journey to the suspected krill base was tense. The shuttle moved cautiously, using the shadows of nearby asteroids to avoid detection. Inside, the strike team reviewed their plan. Emily plotted the exact coordinates of the target moon, while Jack inspected the explosives they would use to destroy the base. Sarah and Mark double-checked their weapons, ensuring everything was in working order. Finally, the moon came into view, a desolate, barren landscape pockmarked with craters and jagged cliffs. Its surface was eerily quiet, but the team knew better than to trust appearances. As they descended, Emily pointed to a series of unnatural ridges on the horizon. "There," she whispered. "That has to be it." The shuttle landed in a secluded crater, hidden from view by the surrounding rocks. The team disembarked, their boots crunching softly against the dusty ground. Laura signaled for silence as they crept toward the structure, a sprawling, hive-like complex carved into the side of a cliff. Green lights pulsed faintly along its edges, giving it an otherworldly appearance. "This place gives me the creeps," Jack muttered under his breath, adjusting the strap of his rifle. "Stay focused," Laura reminded him, her voice low but firm. "We're here to do a job." They reached the entrance without incident, slipping inside undetected thanks to stealth suits that masked their heat signatures. The interior was a maze of tunnels and chambers, filled with strange machinery and glowing conduits. The air was thick with an acrid smell, and the faint hum of alien technology echoed off the walls. As they moved deeper into the base, the team discovered something unexpected: a group of human prisoners being held in a makeshift cell. Their faces were gaunt, their clothes tattered, but their eyes lit up with hope when they saw the strike team. "You're human?" one of the captives asked weakly, his voice trembling. Laura nodded. "We're here to stop the krill. Can you walk?" "Yes," the man replied, helping the others to their feet. "Thank you." Laura hesitated for a moment, torn between completing the mission and rescuing the prisoners. Finally, she made her decision. "We can't leave them here," she said firmly. "Jack, set the charges. We'll escort the prisoners back to the shuttle." "But Mom, that wasn't part of the plan," Jack protested. "Plans change," Laura replied simply. "Now move." The team sprang into action, planting explosives throughout the base while keeping a close eye on the prisoners. The tension was palpable. Every second felt like an eternity, and the sound of distant footsteps suggested the Krill were onto them. As the final charge was set, Laura gave the order to retreat. "Let's go," she shouted, leading the way back through the tunnels. Behind them, alarms blared loudly, and the glow of the base intensified as the Krill scrambled to respond. The race back to the shuttle was harrowing. The strike team fought off several Krill patrols, their weapons blazing in the narrow corridors. By the time they reached the landing site, everyone was breathing heavily, adrenaline coursing through their veins. "Get aboard," Laura ordered, ushering the prisoners into the shuttle. Once everyone was inside, Jack activated the detonator. A series of massive explosions rocked the base, sending shockwaves rippling across the moon's surface. As the shuttle ascended, the team watched the destruction unfold below. The Krill base collapsed in on itself, consumed by fire and debris. For the first time in hours, Laura allowed herself a small smile. "One down," she said quietly, "but we're not done yet." The shuttle carrying Captain Laura Hayes and her strike team sped away from the moon, leaving behind the burning ruins of the Krill base. The destruction they had caused was immense, but the sense of relief was short-lived. As the small craft emerged from the moon's shadow, the crew saw what they had feared most: a fleet of Krill ships descending upon them like a swarm of angry insects. Their jagged hulls shimmered with an eerie green glow, and their weapons were already charging for attack. "Captain, we've got company," Corporal Jack Miller said grimly, pointing to the view screen. His hands gripped the controls tightly as he prepared for evasive maneuvers. The shuttle was fast, but it wasn't built for combat. Against the Krill fleet, it stood little chance. Laura clenched her jaw, her sharp eyes scanning the scene outside. "How far are we from the Eagle's Wrath?" "About 10 minutes if we push the engines to max," Lieutenant Emily Ross replied, her voice tense. She was seated at the navigation console, her fingers flying over the controls. "But those ships will be on us in half that time." "Then we'll have to hold them off," Laura said firmly. Her tone left no room for argument. "Jack, keep us moving. Everyone else, man the turrets. We're not going down without a fight." The team sprang into action. Private Sarah Lane and Technician Mark Riley took positions at the rear-mounted turrets, their faces set with determination. The prisoners huddled together in the center of the shuttle, trying to stay out of the way. They had survived captivity only to find themselves thrust into another deadly situation. As the Krill ships closed in, the shuttle rocked violently under the first volley of plasma bolts. Sparks flew inside the cabin, and warning lights flashed across the dashboard. Jack cursed under his breath, his hands working furiously to dodge the incoming fire. "These guys don't play fair," he shouted, swerving sharply to avoid another blast. "Keep steady," Laura ordered, gripping the back of his seat for balance. "We need to buy enough time to reach the Eagle's Wrath." The shuttle's turrets roared to life, unleashing a barrage of bullets and missiles at the pursuing Krill ships. Sarah and Mark worked tirelessly, their aim precise despite the chaos around them. One of the alien vessels exploded in a fiery burst, its glowing frame breaking apart as debris scattered into space. But for every ship they destroyed, 2 more seemed to take its place. "They're relentless," Mark yelled, reloading his turret. "There's too many of them." "We can't give up," Laura shouted back. Her voice was calm but firm, cutting through the noise. "Stay focused. We're almost there." Emily checked the navigation screen again. 5 minutes to the rendezvous point. "Hold on." The next few minutes felt like hours. The shuttle weaved through the Krill fleet, dodging plasma bolts and retaliating with everything it had. The crew fought with desperation, knowing their survival depended on reaching the Eagle's Wrath. Inside the shuttle, the air grew thick with smoke and the smell of burnt metal. Alarms blared loudly, warning of critical damage to the engines and shields. Suddenly, a massive explosion rocked the shuttle, throwing everyone off balance. Jack struggled to regain control as flames licked at the edges of the cockpit. "We've been hit," he yelled. "Engine 3 is down. We're out power to Engine 2. Laura commanded, leaning forward to help stabilize the craft. "We can't stop now." Back on the Eagle's Wrath, the remaining crew watched anxiously as the shuttle approached. Lieutenant Daniel Carter paced the bridge, his hands clenched into fists. He could see the Krill fleet closing in on the tiny craft, their weapons firing relentlessly. "They're not going to make it," he muttered under his breath. "They will," Ensign Rachel Monroe said firmly, though her voice trembled slightly. She adjusted the sensors, trying to get a clearer view of the battle. "They have to." Chief Engineer Kevin Doyle emerged from the engine room, his face streaked with grease and sweat. "Shields are holding steady at 20%, he reported. "If we engage the Krill now, we might be able to draw some of them away from the shuttle." "It's risky," Daniel replied, turning to face him. "But we don't have a choice." Laura's voice crackled over the comms, interrupting their conversation. "Eagle's Wrath, this is Hayes. We're under heavy fire and won't last much longer. Prepare for extraction." "We're ready, Captain," Daniel responded, his voice steady despite the tension. "Just hang on." The Eagle's Wrath surged forward, its engines roaring as it moved to intercept the Krill fleet. Chief Doyle monitored the shield levels closely, shouting instructions to his team. "Divert auxiliary power to the front shields. We need to hold them off long enough to bring the shuttle aboard." On the bridge, Rachel activated the ship's weapons systems, targeting the nearest Krill vessels. "Firing now," she announced, her voice rising with urgency. Bright flashes of light filled the void as the human warship unleashed a devastating barrage of missiles and plasma bolts. The distraction worked. Several Krill ships turned their attention to the Eagle's Wrath, giving the shuttle a brief window of opportunity. Jack pushed the engines to their limit, guiding the battered craft toward the safety of the larger ship. Flames still flickered in the cockpit, and the controls were sluggish, but he refused to give up. "We're almost there," Emily called out, her voice tinged with hope. 1 minute. The shuttle entered the docking bay just as another volley of plasma bolts struck its hull. Sparks flew inside the cabin, and the impact threw everyone to the floor. But the doors sealed shut behind them, and the artificial gravity stabilized the craft. They had made it. Laura climbed out of her seat, her body aching from the ordeal. "Everyone okay?" she asked, glancing at her team. Nods and murmurs of confirmation followed, though exhaustion was written on every face. Outside, the Eagle's Wrath continued to battle the Krill fleet. The aliens were furious, their attacks growing more aggressive with each passing moment. But the human crew held their ground, fighting with everything they had left. Daniel coordinated the ship's movements with precision, guiding it through the chaos, while Rachel kept the weapons firing steadily. "Shields at 10%, Kevin shouted from the engine room. "We can't take much more of this." "Hold on," Daniel replied, his voice tight with strain. He knew they couldn't win a prolonged fight, not in their current state, but they didn't need to. All they needed was to survive long enough to escape. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the Krill began to retreat. Their numbers had dwindled significantly, and their flagship, damaged and smoking, turned away from the battle. The remaining ships followed, disappearing into the darkness of space. The bridge fell silent as the crew processed what had just happened. They had faced overwhelming odds and somehow emerged victorious. For a moment, no one spoke. Then, slowly, cheers erupted throughout the ship. "We did it," Rachel whispered, tears streaming down her face. "We actually did it." Daniel let out a shaky laugh, running a hand through his hair. "Yeah, we did." Laura joined them on the bridge moments later, her uniform singed and her face smeared with soot. But her expression was one of quiet pride. "Good work, everyone," she said, her voice soft but full of gratitude. "Today we proved something important, not just to the Krill, but to ourselves. Humanity doesn't back down. No matter how tough the fight, we stand our ground." The crew nodded, their spirits lifted by her words. They had faced death and come out stronger. But deep down, they all knew one thing: the Krill would return. And when they did, humanity would be ready. The battle was over, but the Eagle's wrath was far from safe. The ship drifted through space, its battered hull groaning under the strain of countless repairs. Chief Engineer Kevin Doyle worked tirelessly in the engine room, his team scrambling to patch up the worst of the damage. Sparks flew around them as they welded broken panels and rerouted power to failing systems. Despite their efforts, the ship was a shadow of its former self, limping along like a wounded animal. On the bridge, Lieutenant Daniel Carter monitored the sensors closely, his eyes scanning for any sign of the Krill returning. The aliens had retreated, but no one believed they were truly gone. "Captain," he said, turning to Laura Hayes, "we need to get out of this sector. If they come back with reinforcements, we won't last another fight." Laura nodded, her expression grim. She knew he was right. The Eagle's wrath had survived, but it was a miracle that wouldn't happen again if they stayed here. "Set a course for the nearest safe zone," she ordered. "We'll regroup and plan our next move." As the ship turned away from the battlefield, the crew began to take stock of their losses. The shuttle that had carried the strike team was beyond repair, its engines fried and its hull riddled with holes. Several sections of the Eagle's wrath itself were sealed off due to structural damage, and the medical bay was filled with injured crew members. Among them were Private Sarah Lane and Technician Mark Riley, who had suffered burns during the final moments of the shuttle's escape. Their condition was stable, but they would need time to recover. Despite the injuries and exhaustion, morale among the survivors was surprisingly high. The crew had faced impossible odds and emerged victorious. They had destroyed the Krill base, rescued human prisoners, and driven the alien fleet into retreat. For many, it was proof that humanity could stand against even the most dangerous threats. In the mess hall, the rescued prisoners gathered around makeshift tables, sharing stories of their ordeal. Most had been captured during raids on frontier colonies, taken by the Krill, and held in brutal conditions. One man, an older engineer named George Miller, spoke up, his voice trembling with emotion. "You saved us when no one else could. We thought we were done for, but you came back for us. You didn't leave us behind." Laura, who had joined the group briefly, gave him a small smile. "That's what we do. No matter how tough things get, we don't give up on each other." Her words resonated with everyone in the room. The prisoners weren't just grateful for their rescue, they were inspired. Many vowed to return to Earth Fleet and join the fight against the Krill, determined to repay the debt they owed to the crew of the Eagle's wrath. But not all the news was good. In the briefing room, Laura met with her senior officers to discuss the aftermath of the battle. The mood was somber, the weight of their losses hanging heavily in the air. "We've lost 2 crew members," she said quietly, reading from a datapad. "Ensign Peter Lane and Technician Lisa Harbour. They gave everything to protect this ship and everyone on it." No one spoke for a moment. The names hit hard, reminders of the cost of their victory. Finally, Rachel Monroe cleared her throat, her voice barely above a whisper. "They were brave. We'll make sure their sacrifice wasn't in vain." Laura nodded. "Yes, we will. And we'll honor them by finishing what we started. The Krill are still out there, and they'll come after us again. But now we know something important. They're not invincible. If we work together, we can beat them." Daniel leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "What's the plan, Captain? Do we head back to Earth Fleet and warn them about the Krill?" Laura hesitated, considering the options. Returning to Earth Fleet was tempting. It would give them a chance to refit the ship, recruit reinforcements, and prepare for a larger-scale conflict. But deep down, she knew they couldn't afford to wait. The Krill were too dangerous, their attacks too unpredictable. Every day they delayed meant more lives lost, more colonies destroyed. "No," she said finally, her voice firm. We stay out here. The Krill are still operating in this sector, and we're the only ones who can stop them. If we go back now, they'll have free rein to continue their raids. We'll find another base, gather intelligence, and hit them where it hurts. That's the only way to end this." Kevin sighed, rubbing his temples. "The ship's in bad shape, Captain. I can keep her running, but we'll need supplies and luck to pull this off." "We'll manage," Laura replied. "We always do." Over the next few days, the crew worked together to stabilize the Eagle's Wrath. Repairs were slow and difficult, but the team refused to give up. Kevin and his engineers patched up the engines, while Rachel and the communications team worked to restore the long-range scanners. The medical staff tended to the injured, ensuring everyone received the care they needed. Meanwhile, Laura spent time with the rescued prisoners, learning more about the Krill's operations. Their stories painted a clearer picture of the aliens' tactics: swift, brutal raids followed by quick withdrawals. The Krill avoided direct confrontation whenever possible, relying on their superior speed and technology to outmaneuver their enemies. But they also made mistakes, small oversights that humans could exploit. One piece of information stood out. A young woman named Clara Evans, who had been captured during a supply convoy raid, mentioned a name repeatedly whispered among the Krell: Commander Vrax. According to Clara, Vrax was the leader of the Krill fleet, a ruthless strategist responsible for countless attacks on human settlements. If they could find and eliminate Vrax, it might cripple the Krill's command structure. Laura shared the information with her officers during another briefing. "If we can locate Vrax, we might have a chance to end this war before it spreads," she said. "It's a long shot, but it's worth trying." Daniel frowned, studying the data on the screen. "Finding one ship in this vastness won't be easy. Even if we narrow down the search area, it'll take time and resources we don't have." "Then we'll improvise," Laura responded. "We've done it before. We'll do it again." The crew set to work, using the limited intel they had to plot a new course. The Eagle's Wrath moved cautiously through the sector, avoiding areas where Krill activity had been reported. Along the way, they encountered abandoned outposts and damaged freighters, remnants of the aliens' raids. Each discovery added to their understanding of the enemy, giving them clues about where Vrax might be hiding. As the days passed, tensions mounted. The crew was exhausted, their bodies pushed to the limit. Supplies were running low, and tempers flared during arguments over rationing and priorities. But through it all, Laura remained a steady presence, her calm demeanor keeping the team focused. She reminded them why they were fighting, not just for survival, but for the future of humanity. Finally, after weeks of searching, the scanners picked up something unusual: a lone Krill ship lurking near the edge of a dense nebula. Its size and design suggested it was a command vessel, larger and more advanced than the others they had encountered. Laura's heart raced as she studied the readings. This could be it, their chance to take down Vrax. "Prepare for battle," she ordered, her voice cutting through the tension on the bridge. "This is it. Let's finish what we started." The Eagle's Wrath surged forward, its engines roaring despite the wear and tear. The crew braced themselves, knowing the fight ahead would be their toughest yet. But they were ready. They had faced death before and lived to tell the tale. Whatever awaited them in the nebula, they would face it together. For humanity, for hope, for victory. The Eagle's Wrath approached the edge of the nebula cautiously, its battered hull blending into the swirling clouds of gas and dust. The crew worked silently, their movements precise and deliberate, as they prepared for what could be their final battle. Captain Laura Hayes stood at the center of the bridge, her sharp eyes scanning the monitors before her. The lone Krill ship loomed ahead, its jagged silhouette barely visible through the haze. "Are we sure this is the command vessel?" Laura asked, her voice calm but firm. Lieutenant Daniel Carter nodded, pointing to the data on his screen. "It matches the profile. Larger than the others, advanced shielding and heavily armed. If Vrax is anywhere, it's here." Laura clenched her jaw. Then we'll hit them hard and fast. We don't have time for mistakes. The tension in the room was palpable. Everyone knew the stakes. This wasn't just another fight. It was a chance to end the war before it spread further. If they succeeded, they could cripple the Krill's leadership and buy humanity precious time to prepare. But if they failed, the consequences would be catastrophic. Chief Engineer Kevin Doyle checked the ship's systems one last time. The engines were running at half capacity, and the shields were barely holding together. Still, he gave a small nod to Laura. "We're as ready as we'll ever be." "Good," she replied. "Let's do this." The Eagle's raft slipped deeper into the nebula, using the dense clouds to mask its approach. The Krill ship remained stationary, its glowing hull pulsing faintly as if waiting. Laura signaled for silence, her hand raised as the crew held their breath. Then, without warning, the alien vessel came to life, its weapons charging and engines roaring. "They've spotted us," Ensign Rachel Monroe shouted, her voice rising in alarm. "Fire everything," Laura ordered, her tone cutting through the chaos. The Eagle's wrath unleashed a barrage of missiles and plasma bolts, targeting the Krill ship's weak points. Explosions lit up the nebula as the two vessels clashed, their weapons tearing through the thick clouds of gas. The Krill retaliated fiercely, their shots striking the human warship with devastating force. Alarms blared across the bridge as the shields dropped dangerously low. "Shields at 15%. Rachel called out, her hands trembling as she adjusted the controls. "We can't take much more of this. Keep firing," Laura commanded, her voice unwavering. "We need to break through their defenses." Daniel guided the ship with expert precision, weaving between the blasts and closing the distance to the enemy. "If we can get close enough, we might be able to disable their engines," he said, his eyes locked on the navigation screen. Kevin worked frantically in the engine room, rerouting power to keep the ship operational. Sparks flew around him as he shouted orders to his team. "Hold on down there," he yelled. "We're not done yet." Back on the bridge, the crew fought with everything they had. Weapons Officer Corporal Jack Miller coordinated the turrets, ensuring every shot counted. His hands moved quickly over the controls, targeting the Krill ship's weapon systems and shield generators. One by one, the alien vessel's defenses began to falter. "We're getting through," Jack announced, a hint of excitement in his voice. "Their shields are down." "Now's our chance," Laura said sharply. "Target their engines. Take them out of the fight." The Eagle's wrath surged forward, its damaged hull groaning under the strain. A final volley of missiles struck the Krill ship, causing a massive explosion that sent shockwaves rippling through the nebula. Flames engulfed the alien vessel as it began to break apart, its once mighty frame crumbling into pieces. But the victory came at a cost. The Eagle's wrath rocked violently as another blast struck its side, sending debris flying across the bridge. Warning lights flashed, and smoke filled the air. Laura stumbled but quickly regained her footing, her focus unbroken. "Damage report," she demanded, her voice cutting through the noise. "Engine failure in Sector 3, Kevin shouted from the comms. "We're losing power." "Seal off the affected areas," Laura ordered. "Get us out of here." Daniel worked furiously to stabilize the ship, guiding it away from the wreckage of the Krill vessel. The crew scrambled to contain the damage, sealing breaches and extinguishing fires. Slowly, the chaos subsided, leaving behind an eerie silence. As the Eagle's wrath drifted away from the battlefield, the crew took stock of their losses. The ship was in even worse shape than before, its systems barely functional. Injuries were widespread, and supplies were nearly depleted. But despite the exhaustion and pain, there was a sense of triumph. They had done it. They had destroyed the Krill command ship, and with it, their leader, Commander Vrax. Laura gathered her senior officers in the briefing room, her expression a mix of pride and sorrow. "We've dealt a major blow to the Krill," she said, her voice soft but resolute. "But we're not out of danger yet. There will be more of them, and they'll come after us harder than ever. Daniel nodded, his face pale but determined. We'll be ready. No matter what happens, we'll keep fighting. Rachel added quietly, and we'll honor those who didn't make it. Their sacrifice won't be forgotten. Laura looked at each of them, her heart swelling with gratitude. These men and women had endured unimaginable hardships, yet they had never given up. Together, they had proven that humanity could stand against even the most formidable foes. We've shown the galaxy what we're made of, Laura said finally. Courage, resilience, and unity. That's what defines us. And no matter how tough the road ahead, we'll keep moving forward. The crew returned to their stations, their spirits lifted by her words. The Eagle's raft limped toward the nearest safe zone, its journey far from over. But for now, they allowed themselves a moment of quiet reflection. They had faced death and emerged victorious. And though the war was far from finished, they knew one thing for certain. The Krill would remember this day, the day humanity proved it could not be broken. In the depths of space, the surviving Krill whispered warnings to their kin, never underestimate the humans again. The Eagle's raft drifted slowly through the vast emptiness of space, its broken hull a testament to the battles it had fought and survived. The crew worked tirelessly to keep the ship operational, patching up holes, rerouting power, and tending to the injured. Supplies were running dangerously low, but no one complained. They had faced death countless times and emerged victorious. Now their goal was simple: reach the nearest safe zone and regroup. Captain Laura Hayes stood on the bridge, her sharp eyes scanning the monitors before her. She looked weary. Her uniform was torn, her face streaked with soot, but her spirit remained unbroken. Around her, the crew moved with quiet determination, each person focused on their task. Ensign Rachel Monroe adjusted the sensors, searching for any sign of danger ahead. Lieutenant Daniel Carter plotted the course, his hand steady despite the exhaustion etched into his face. We're almost there, Daniel said finally, breaking the silence. His voice was calm but carried a hint of relief. Another 12 hours, and we'll reach the safe zone. Laura nodded, though her expression remained serious. Good, but stay alert. We don't know if the Krill have reinforcements nearby. Rachel glanced at the captain, her young face showing both admiration and concern. Do you think they'll come after us again? They always do, Laura replied simply. Her tone wasn't bitter, it was matter of fact. She had seen enough of war to know that enemies rarely gave up easily. But we've shown them what we're capable of. That counts for something. As the hours passed, the crew began to allow themselves small moments of hope. In the mess hall, the rescued prisoners gathered with the crew, sharing stories of survival and resilience. George Miller, the older engineer who had been captured by the Krill, spoke about his time in captivity. They thought they could break us, he said, his voice steady despite the memories. But they didn't count on one thing: humanity's refusal to give up. The room fell silent for a moment, the weight of his words sinking in. Then, slowly, someone began to clap. Others joined in, their applause filling the cramped space with a sense of unity and pride. These men and women, both crew and prisoners, had endured unimaginable hardships, yet they had fought back. Together, they had proven that even in the darkest moments, hope could prevail. Laura entered the mess hall briefly, her presence drawing immediate attention. The applause faded, replaced by respectful silence. She looked around at the faces staring back at her, some bruised, some bandaged, all tired, and felt a surge of gratitude. You've all done something extraordinary, she said, her voice soft but firm. You've shown the galaxy what humanity is made of: courage, strength, and an unshakable will to survive. Her words resonated deeply with everyone in the room. For many of the rescued prisoners, it was the first time they had felt truly free since their capture. They vowed to repay the crew's bravery by joining Earth Fleet and continuing the fight against the Krill. Their determination inspired the crew, reminding them why they had risked everything. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the Eagle's Wrath approached the safe zone. It was a small outpost nestled within the orbit of a distant planet, its lights flickering faintly in the darkness. To the crew, it looked like a beacon of hope, a place where they could rest, repair, and prepare for whatever lay ahead. Outpost Alpha, this is the Eagle's Wrath. Requesting permission to dock, Rachel called out, her voice cracking slightly with emotion. A moment of tense silence followed. Then, a voice crackled over the comms. Eagle's Wrath, this is Outpost Alpha. Permission granted. Welcome home. The bridge erupted in cheers, the crew unable to contain their relief. Tears streamed down Rachel's face as she turned to Laura. We made it, she whispered, her voice trembling. Laura smiled faintly, though her eyes betrayed the weight she carried. Yes, we did. But this isn't the end. Daniel stepped forward, his expression thoughtful. What happens next? Do we head back to Earth Fleet? Laura shook her head. Not yet. The Krill are still out there, and they'll come after us again. We need to gather intelligence, find the remaining bases, and hit them before they recover. This victory buys us time, but it doesn't mean the war is over. Kevin Doyle, the chief engineer, leaned against the wall, his arms crossed. The ship's in bad shape, Captain. We can't keep going like this forever. I know, Laura replied, her tone softening. But we've got a team of the best engineers, pilots, and fighters in the fleet. If anyone can keep this ship flying, it's us. The crew nodded, their exhaustion giving way to renewed determination. They had faced impossible odds and emerged victorious. Now, they were ready to do it again. Over the next few days, the Eagle's Wrath underwent repairs at the outpost. Supplies were replenished, injuries were treated, and the ship's systems were slowly brought back online. The rescued prisoners were given medical care and sent on transports back to Earth Fleet, carrying with them the story of the Eagle's Wrath's bravery. Word of their victory spread quickly, inspiring others to join the fight against the Krill. For Laura and her crew, the respite was brief but necessary. They knew the road ahead would be long and difficult, but they also knew they weren't alone. Humanity had faced threats before, and each time it had risen to meet the challenge. On the final day at the outpost, Laura gathered her senior officers in the briefing room. The mood was somber but hopeful. We've accomplished something incredible, she began, her voice steady. We've struck a major blow to the Krill and shown them that humanity won't back down. But our work isn't finished. She paused, looking at each of them in turn. There will be more battles, more sacrifices, but I believe in this crew. I believe in what we can achieve together. No matter how tough things get, we'll keep fighting. For Earth, for our families, and for the future. The officers nodded, their expressions unwavering. They had faced death and lived to tell the tale. Now they were ready to face whatever came next. As the Eagle's Wrath departed the outpost and set course for uncharted territory, its battered hull gleamed faintly under the light of a distant star. The crew stood united, their spirits lifted by the knowledge that they had already changed the course of history. The Krill had underestimated humanity once, and they would never make that mistake again. In the depths of space, the war continued. But aboard the Eagle's Wrath, courage burned brighter than ever. And as long as that flame remained, humanity would endure.